Moneyball, The Art of Winning an Unfair Game by Michael Lewis. Picture this. It's a sweltering afternoon in San Diego, 1980. The baseball diamond shimmers in the heat. A group of high school phenoms line up for a 60-yard dash, and the scouts lean forward, stopwatches ready. These aren't just kids anymore. They're investments, walking collections of talent that could be worth millions. Then there's this one kid, Beane, tall, chiseled, with what the old-timers call the good face. He's got it all: speed, power, looks. When the starting gun fires, he absolutely demolishes the competition. 3 full strides ahead. The scouts can barely believe it. They make everyone run again, just to be sure. Same result. This kid is destined for greatness, a future Hall of Famer in the making. Except he wasn't. Beane completely flamed out. His professional career was a quiet disaster, a textbook case of unfulfilled potential. Now here's the twist that makes this story incredible. That same failed prospect would later wage war against the entire baseball establishment, using his brain instead of his body, and change the game forever. Welcome to Moneyball. Sure, it's been a bestseller and a Hollywood hit, but this book is so much deeper than baseball. It's a blueprint for every underdog who's ever faced impossible odds. It's about finding gold where everyone else sees garbage, about using your mind to beat opponents with way more resources than you. By the time we're done, you'll understand how a broke team from Oakland went toe-to-toe with the mighty Yankees, and how those same principles can help you navigate any arena where the deck seems stacked against you. Let's dive in. Imagine a game where the only rule is, whoever has the most money wins. Not very inspiring, right? But that's exactly what professional baseball had become by the early 2000s. Less about athletic competition, more about who could cut the biggest checks. At the top sat teams like the New York Yankees, dropping $126 million on payroll. They could buy any superstar they wanted. At the bottom, the Oakland Athletics, scraping by on $40 million, less than a third of the Yankees' budget. The gap was massive and growing. Everyone agreed. Poor teams were doomed. They'd be stuck with the broken down, the washed up, and the mediocre, while the rich teams collected all the stars. But something weird was happening. One of those poor teams kept winning. The Oakland A's, despite having one of the smallest payrolls in baseball, were absolutely crushing it, making the playoffs year after year, even pushing the Yankees to the brink. The commissioner called it an aberration, a fluke that defied explanation. But it wasn't a fluke. It was a revolution, and at the center stood Beane, that failed golden boy, now general manager of the A's. See, Billy had learned something painful from his own wreckage. What the scouts valued, the perfect body, the 5 tools, the good face, was often an illusion. He was living proof that baseball's conventional wisdom was broken. He'd been the flawless prospect who couldn't handle the mental game. The moment he failed, he'd spiral, looking for something to break. He didn't just hate failing. It was like he didn't know how to fail. Meanwhile, his scrappy minor league roommate, Lenny Dykstra, couldn't have looked more different. Short, undersized, nothing special physically, but Lenny had something priceless. He literally couldn't remember his failures. Every mistake evaporated instantly. Every success fueled him. Billy watched in amazement as this guy with a fraction of his talent succeeded where he couldn't. That contrast sparked an epiphany. I started to get a sense of what a baseball player was, and I could see it wasn't me. It was Lenny. That personal disaster became his superpower. He couldn't outspend the Yankees, so he'd outthink them. He'd hunt for inefficiencies, searching for players undervalued by traditional scouting. Baseball's island of misfit toys. Players with weird flaws that made them cheap, but who could still do the one thing that mattered: win games. But what actually led to winning? The old guard would tell you batting average, stolen bases, runs batted in. They loved fast, athletic players who looked good in pinstripes. Billy didn't care what the old guard thought. He'd walked into an organization already quietly rebelling, thanks to Sandy Alderson, a former Marine and Harvard lawyer who knew nothing about baseball when hired as GM. As an outsider, he saw everything with fresh eyes. He questioned everything. And he discovered the work of an obscure writer who worked the night shift at a pork and beans factory in Kansas. That man was Bill James. Bill James was the secret architect of the Moneyball revolution. Working in near-total obscurity, James applied scientific thinking to baseball. He didn't care about romance or tradition. He cared about truth. And he discovered that baseball statistics, as commonly used, were basically a language of lies. Take batting average, everyone's favorite stat. James proved it had surprisingly little correlation with scoring runs. What actually mattered were two different numbers: on-base percentage and slugging percentage. On-base percentage measures how often you avoid making an out. Think about it. You only get 3 outs per inning. They're precious. Anything that prevents an out, a hit, a walk, whatever, is incredibly valuable. Slugging percentage measures power, doubles, triples, home runs. James showed these two stats were far better predictors of run production. Yet the entire baseball world obsessed over other stuff. They fetishized stolen bases, even though the math showed that unless you succeeded at least 70% of the time, attempting steals actually hurt your team. They loved sacrifice bunts, literally giving away one of your precious outs. This was revolutionary knowledge, a secret language only a handful of people understood. When Billy Beane took over the A's, armed with this insight, he realized he'd found his edge. Everyone else was shopping for players based on appearances, using outdated metrics. They were buying the wrong things, which meant players with skills that truly mattered, like drawing walks and getting on base, were systematically undervalued. Bargains hiding in plain sight. This became the Moneyball strategy. Find the undervalued assets. Billy and his brilliant assistant, Harvard economics grad Paul DePodesta, transformed the A's front office into something resembling a Wall Street trading desk. They didn't care about age, body type, or speed. Only the numbers mattered. Repeatedly, scouts would fall in love with a prospect. "The guy has a great body," they'd gush. "He's a tools guy." Billy would just shake his head. "We're not selling genes here." His point was simple. We're drafting based on production, not looks, and what they needed was players who could get on base. The 2002 amateur draft became the ultimate test. The A's had lost 3 major stars, Jason Giambi, Johnny Damon, and Jason Isringhausen, to richer teams. As compensation, they received an unprecedented 7 first-round picks, their one shot to rebuild everything. The draft room turned into a battlefield between old world and new. On one side, scouts who'd spent lifetimes on the road, trusting their guts. On the other, Billy Beane and Paul DePodesta with his laptop, armed with statistics and probabilities. Scouts presented their favorites, athletic, handsome kids with lots of upside. Billy systematically rejected nearly all of them. "He can't hit," he'd say. When scouts protested, arguing they could fix the swing, reinvent him, Billy would shut it down. "Pro baseball's not real good at reinventing guys. They are who they are." Then Billy started adding his own names, players the scouts barely knew or had dismissed entirely. One was a college catcher named Jeremy Brown. When Billy announced they'd discuss Jeremy Brown, scouts either winced or laughed. Jeremy Brown was, let's say, not a physical specimen. He was a quote, body catcher, one scout noted. Another added, it's soft body, fleshy. The jokes got brutal. If you put him in corduroys, he'd start a fire. Jeremy Brown was the opposite of a five-tool prospect. Slow, doughy, didn't look like a professional athlete. Baseball America didn't even rank him among the top 25 catchers in the country. But Paul DePodesta checked his laptop and saw something else. He's the only player in SEC history with 300 hits and 200 walks. 300 hits and 200 walks. To the old scouts, just college numbers. But to Billy and Paul, it was a signal, evidence. This kid, despite his bad body, possessed a rare, almost genius-level understanding of the strike zone. He knew how to get on base. He knew how to avoid outs. He had the one skill they valued above everything. The scouts were horrified. Billy, does he really belong in that group? One pleaded, as Billy moved Jeremy Brown's name into first-round territory. That's when Billy laid out his entire philosophy. He looked at his scouts and said, we're blending what we see, but we aren't allowing ourselves to be victimized by what we see. They wouldn't be tricked by appearances anymore. They'd been victimized when they drafted Billy Beane himself, the perfect body who crashed. Now they'd trust the data. They took Jeremy Brown with a first-round pick, shocking the baseball world. And they didn't stop. They built their entire 2002 team around this principle. To replace Jason Giambi, one of baseball's best hitters, they didn't hunt for another superstar. They couldn't afford one. Instead, they broke Giambi into component parts and tried recreating his production through multiple players. Giambi had a .477 on-base percentage. Nearly 50% of the time, he reached base. So they found three players other teams viewed as defective. First, David Justice, a former superstar now 36 and supposedly washed up. But Billy and Paul's research showed one skill doesn't decline with age, controlling the strike zone. Justice could still draw walks. They were buying his skill, not his athleticism. Second, Scott Hatteberg. He'd been a Red Sox catcher who suffered a nerve injury in his throwing arm and couldn't throw anymore. Career over, everyone thought. But Hatteberg mastered the strike zone. Rarely struck out, drew walks, wore pitchers down by seeing tons of pitches. Excellent on-base percentage. The A's signed him for under $1 million and decided to teach him first base. An experiment. He was terrified. Had never played first in his life. Spent the off-season with his wife, hitting him grounders on a tennis court. Third player, Jason Giambi's younger brother, Jeremy. Slow, terrible fielder, bit of a party reputation. But you guessed it, phenomenal on-base percentage. This was their team, the island of misfit toys. Players nobody wanted, each with a wart, as Paul called it. A catcher who couldn't throw, an old slugger who couldn't run, a slow-footed partier. But they all shared one hidden gift. They knew how to get on base. The baseball world looked at the 2002 Oakland A's and predicted disaster. They'd lost their three biggest stars and replaced them with this. Then something magical happened. That team, built on overlooked statistics and undervalued players, went on one of baseball's most incredible runs. Mid-season, they won 20 consecutive games, setting a new American League record. The final game of that streak was almost too perfect to believe. The A's jumped to an 11-0 lead, then watched it completely evaporate, tied 11-11 in the bottom of the ninth. Who came up to pinch hit? Scott Hatteberg, the catcher who couldn't throw, the guy supposedly finished in baseball. On the first pitch he could drive, he swung. Walk-off home run. Game over. The stadium erupted. Teammates mobbed him at home plate. Pure, unscripted joy. A player every other team had discarded just delivered the season's most iconic moment. Ultimate validation of the Moneyball theory. They'd found a market inefficiency and exploited it to compete with giants. They finished with 103 wins, tied with the Yankees for most in baseball, on a fraction of the payroll. In their division, the final standings were almost a perfect inverse of payroll. Richest team, Texas Rangers, finished last. Poorest team, Oakland A's, finished first. But the story doesn't end with a World Series championship. For the third straight year, the A's lost in the first playoff round. This is crucial. The Moneyball system was designed to maximize winning over a long 162-game season, where skill and probability eventually trump luck. But playoffs are a short series, a crapshoot where luck can overwhelm skill. The old guard seized on this. See, their system doesn't work when it matters. TV commentators like Hall of Famer Joe Morgan insisted that in playoffs, you need to manufacture runs with bunts and steals, the exact strategies the A's had proven inefficient. They completely missed the point. The A's hadn't lost because their offense failed. They'd actually scored more runs per game in the playoffs than the regular season. They lost from bad luck and some poor pitching. But the narrative stuck. The computer nerds had been defeated by grizzled veterans who understood the human element. But the idea was already loose, spreading faster than anyone could control. Other teams, other owners started paying attention. Boston Red Sox owner John Henry, who had made his fortune using quantitative analysis in financial markets, saw the parallels immediately. He tried hiring Billy away for a record-breaking $12.5 million. In a moment of intense soul-searching, Billy turned it down. He remembered his one other money-based decision, signing with the Mets instead of attending Stanford, and refused to repeat that mistake. But it didn't matter. The revolution had begun. The Red Sox hired brilliant 28-year-old Yale grad Theo Epstein as their GM, a guy who viewed Beane as his role model. Toronto hired Beane's right-hand man, J.P. Ricciardi, and the Red Sox even hired Bill James as a senior advisor. The secret was out. The club of old baseball men running the game was being invaded by outsiders who trusted data over tradition. They understood the goal wasn't just buying players, it was buying wins. And to buy wins, you needed to buy runs. The player market was inefficient, and those who could spot the inefficiency, who could see value in the fat catcher, the aging slugger, the weird pitcher, held the key to winning an unfair game. When you step back from Moneyball, you realize it's barely about baseball. Baseball was just the laboratory where a powerful idea got tested. At its core, this book tackles one of the most fundamental challenges we all face. How do you make good decisions in a world drowning in noise, bias, and outdated conventional wisdom? The lesson of Billy Beane and the Oakland A's is that answers often hide not in gut feelings or tradition, but in data. It's about having the courage to ask one simple, powerful question: what does the evidence actually say? For decades, baseball was run by people who trusted their eyes. They saw a player with a good body and assumed stardom. They saw someone slow or overweight and wrote them off. They were, as Michael Lewis writes, victimized by what they see. They couldn't see the hidden variables, the plate discipline, the on-base percentage, that truly drove success. This story reminds us that our intuition, valuable as it can be, is also deeply flawed. We're all susceptible to biases. We fall for appearances. We overvalue flashy, dramatic actions and undervalue the quiet, consistent, boring habits that truly lead to victory. The player who crushes a towering home run is a hero. The player who patiently works the count and draws a walk is often forgotten. Yet Moneyball proves the walk can be just as valuable, sometimes more so. And that brings me to the most profound lesson for anyone starting out. You're going to enter fields, business, art, science, whatever, dominated by an old guard. People will tell you, this is how we've always done things. They'll judge you on criteria that might have nothing to do with your actual ability to contribute. They'll look at your resume, your school, your appearance, and make snap judgments. Moneyball offers a different path. It teaches you to look for market inefficiencies. What skills, qualities, or approaches are being undervalued in your field? Is everyone chasing the same glamorous credentials while ignoring less sexy but more effective skills? Can you become the Scott Hatteberg or Jeremy Brown of your industry? Can you find your value where no one else is looking? This requires two things. First, you need to embrace being an outsider. You need to feel comfortable questioning the experts. Bill James wasn't a baseball player. He was a factory night watchman who loved numbers. His distance from the game let him see it more clearly than people paid millions to run it. Second, you need the courage to trust the numbers, even when they feel counterintuitive. The A's endured ridicule for drafting, quote, a fat catcher. They ignored TV announcers screaming their strategy couldn't work. They had to trust their process, even when short-term outcomes were frustrating. As Paul DePodesta said, it's about looking at process rather than outcomes. Too many people make decisions based on outcomes rather than process. That's life-changing wisdom. So how can you apply this today? Here are some things to consider. First, identify your own, quote, on-base percentage. In whatever you're pursuing, good grades, learning a skill, building a business, what's the one metric that truly matters, the one most predictive of success but often overlooked? Is it hours studied or practice problems completed without checking answers? Is it networking events attended or meaningful follow-up conversations? Find your true north metric and focus relentlessly on it. Second, start hunting for your own inefficiencies. What valuable skills are people in your field ignoring? Is everyone learning Python but nobody's mastering persuasive writing? Is everyone building huge social media followings but nobody's developing deep, one-on-one relationships? The greatest opportunities often hide where no one else is looking. That was the book summary of Moneyball, The Art of Winning an Unfair Game by Michael Lewis. We've covered the big ideas, but I'll be honest. A summary is like looking at a photograph of an amazing meal. You can see what's in it, but you can't taste it. The real magic is in the stories, in how Lewis brings these characters to life. It's feeling the tension in that draft room, the frustration of Billy's failed career, and the pure joy of Scott Hatteberg's home run. If anything today sparked your curiosity, I truly encourage you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning a strategy. It's an experience that will fundamentally change how you look for value in the world and in yourself. The link to the book is in the description below. Also, if you found this valuable, please hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss our next journey into another life-changing book. Every week, we explore ideas that have shaped the minds of the world's most successful people. Let's keep growing together.